Good morning, Ospreys. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It is 33 degrees outside here, but it is 66 degrees out where Andy DeBalla is, where he's running the production for us this morning. And I'm not jealous. No, I'm not jealous. I just got my sweater on and I turned up the heat. I'll be fine, Andy. Don't worry about John, okay? Because John is going to be fine. And I'm just worried about you because I think. Mm, maybe you needed a little. Maybe we could go with 70. Today, just so you can take your shirt off, show the ladies what you got.
I'll be hitting the beaches later, John.
All
Just
right,
for
Andy.
you.
All right. Well, just want you to know that we feel sorry for you down there in Florida with your sunshine and your half naked women walking around. I'm sorry. Hate hate to think of you down there doing that. All right. Well, we have to give Andy a hard time because he deserves it. Good morning, everyone. David, Corky, Robert, and let's see who else is here. We have 9 people. That's fine. Here's the deal. Synarchy is not a very sexy name, but it seems like it could be if you think of it as synarchy, like monarchy with a king. Well, synarchy with sin. And that's what I think we have here, if you want to think about it in terms of morality, because it's one of the most immoral forms of government that I could think of. Excuse me. Now, synarchism, it means joint or harmonious rule. Excuse me, I got a cough. And that is like the original idea of it, ruled by a secret elite. And Andy, I think there's actually a entry for Synarchy with instead of ISM to put a Y on the end. If you try it and see you get that, I think it has something that I wanted to emphasize. And what that is that there is denial going on like crazy. Your feet is not running. Hi, Laura. Um, yeah, Andy's doing all right. Okay, Robert says his feed won't start. I guess interesting. Anyway, I wanted to try to focus on the work I'm doing with Synarchy this morning. And I don't want to read a whole lot, but I do want to point out that there's an awful lot out there to read on this topic of Synarchy. And when you look for it, let's see, I guess that's it, huh? I thought there was a Wikipedia article I saw earlier today. That's okay, though. Yeah, no, that just is repeating the same idea of the general idea of what is Synarchy, Andy. But I'll just talk through it. In our studies, we've looked at, Great Britain. We've looked at Venice. We've looked at Amsterdam. We've looked at Germany. We've looked at Switzerland, some with Sean Ross, and we've looked at Austria and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But one place we really haven't looked at is France. And France is the core key element of the Synarchy. And here's the basic idea that after Napoleon was defeated, they created in France this thing called the Third Republic. But the Third Republic was really run by Great Britain, right? They won the war, so they set up the Third Republic in France. And the people that worked for the Third Republic basically were doing the work of Britain. And that was true with foreign policy too. As you remember, that when this American Civil War, the French and the British were strongly supporting the South, at least until the tide turned at Gettysburg. The crews of the U.S. of the CSS Alabama, um, made in Britain, sailed by British sailors for the most part, captained by the uh, famous Raphael Sims of Maryland, of my county, who probably grew up within 30 miles of where I am right now. But he became the admiral of the Confederate Navy, had the famous, the Alabama, roll, Alabama, roll. And the Alabama went out and destroyed a good portion of the merchant shipping of the American merchant fleet. Wow, the mighty A. I'm not sure what that reference is, Andy, unless it's about A for Andy, um, which is a good reminder that we all need Andy. But yeah, let me just talk because I think maybe my mind is going to be able to create the images for you. So in France, there was always the nobility and the church, and they were resentful about the French Revolution, and they were resentful about Napoleon, and they were resentful against the British. In other words, they were a very, very unhappy lot of people who thought that they should still be able to rule under a king, a French king. And what they wanted to do was actually to restore the monarchy in France. And they became organized in various ways. Martinism is a word you'll see, Martinism. Yeah, that's a good one, Andy. Put that one up there. I see you've got something on deck, and that's a good slide. Um, and it got organized in France. Okay, this is good. This is Wondrium is a branch of the History Channel, so please take it with a grain of salt. But I think this one is worth going through. In his sensational report, Henri Chavin, no relation to Derek Chauvin, by the way, the chief of Vichy police, and this is in 1940. Okay, so identified Synarchists in every ministry, including the entourage of the Vichy head of state, Marshal Pétain, the Vichy head of state. Okay. This report led to the belief that a secret society of bankers, industrialists, and technocrats had indeed brought France to the brink of civil war in 1940. And that is a Synarchist flag. Now, let me just tell the story so that I don't have to read it. But you could put that flag back up there. That's a good image. So here's the story. And you'll notice there's 17 stars. I counted them. I'm not sure if that's significant or not, but 17, like the 17 flags. Remember when President Trump conceded, remember, at the airport? 17. Just saying that. Might be significant, might not. Synarchists believe that we can all get along fine if we just stay in our lane. Okay, we're the nobles, you're the merchants, you're the technocrats, and the rest of you guys are serfs. Okay? And if you would just consent to be serfs, everything would be fine. It is all of this crazy democracy talk, this incredible idea of human rights, which don't exist. Are you crazy? Human rights? Really? There's no human rights. If you accept the idea of human rights, then you are going back to the chaos of nature. You're going to say everybody can be their own sovereign and everybody can go out and do whatever they want and take whatever they want from anybody. And it's going to be back to the Stone Age in no time. That's what'll happen if you idiots keep following this constitutional democracy path. Um, so the Chabin report um, went to the French government, and it basically said that there is a group of bankers and nobility and allied with the church's bank. It's called the High Bank of, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it's called the Haute Bank, I think. It's the French. Okay, now this is a good map. All right. Now here you see, leave this up for a minute, Andy, because I'm going to talk through this. Here you see France in 40, 42. Okay, 1942. And generally, the northern part is completely occupied by the Nazis. But the southern part is called Vichy France. And this is Marshal Pétain's government. And this government is the one that Henri Chavin says is infested with Synarchists. Now, in fact, the story is even darker than that. Because here's the story that leads up to World War II from the point of view of studying the Synarchy, which I've been doing for the past, 4 or 5 days pretty intensely. I never thought of the war like this, but this is where the third force comes in, where you don't know that it's just, the Allies against the Axis, you know, any more than we know that it's just the Democrats against the Republicans in politics. There is a third force. And part of our journey together has been looking for it and poking around and trying to find where is this third force. All right. So here's the story. The Synarchists got organized in the late 1800s, 1880, 90, and they were allied mainly with the very conservative popes of the Catholic Church. And those popes, we're talking about Pius the Ninth, Pius the Tenth, basically all the Piuses. Pius the 12th, of course, is the Pope during World War II. But let's start with the basic idea that all of these popes, these conservative popes at least, believe in synarchy. They believe in the old system. You remember we talked in one of my shows about Semper Eadem, the motto of Queen Elizabeth of England, and also the motto of Prince George's County, Maryland, where I grew up, where they have a flag that features a St. George's cross on it, by the way. All of this stuff is tied together, the symbols and the names. So back to France. Well, France, of course, was never had a stable government. Remember, they got defeated in the war by Bismarck in 1871, I think it was. And while they remilitarized, there's a lot of tension between the people that want to be like America with a division of church and state, basically carrying on the principles of the revolution, the liberté, fraternité, égalité, Masons that wanted to keep separating away from the church And basically, the church sees these people as communists. So it's the basic divide between rule by the people and rule by the elite or an emperor. After World War One, of course, France kind of won, kind of lost that war because they had so many deaths. But these Synarchists got serious and formed actual association, and it was based upon the Martinist branch of Freemasonry. These Martinists believe that they not only are they Freemasons, but they're secret Freemasons, um, entitled to rule because of who they are. They staged the revolutions in France that failed in the 30s that we never hear about. But it was the same thing as the business plot of 1933, the one that Smedley Butler uncovered and told Franklin Roosevelt about. This is very important because the people behind the business plot of 1933 were Synarchists. They were allied with DuPont, and DuPont is, as we talked about before in earlier parts of this series, DuPont is old family wealth that is still tied very much to the European banking system. It's just a different connection from the Rockefellers and the different branches of the Rothschilds that are involved. So as the businessman's plot failed in America, there was about 3 of these little plots that failed in France. But they didn't give up. In fact, what they decided, and this is what's amazing to me, they decided that the only way they were going to win, and look at my notes, was a man named Robert Husson, Husson, who spent the whole war in jail, jailed by the Vichy Synarchist, if I may say so, government, um, but wrote about it. And he revealed this organization that uses the initials CSAR, CSAR. And my friends at Sean Ross's channel will love to hear that reference of CSAR in an initial. Now, those are French words which I won't try to re-say, but it's just a committee for the revolution, right? They decided that since they couldn't win a revolution in France, that they needed to have a foreign power to come and defeat the government so then they could take over. So the idea behind the Vichy Synarchist plot was so sinister because we don't think of France as having this terrible tension inside of it. So we've heard of, some of us have heard of the businessman's plot in this country, but nobody's heard of the French revolutionary plots there that were run by the Synarchists. What they think is that if we could just get back into the old system where everybody knew their place, and then sometimes you have to cull the herd, but that's part of being a good Synarchist. You just take care of your herd, of your serfs, in however way you need to. Serfs are there to make money. One of the principal Synarchist ideas is to economize on labor. That means that they're thinking up schemes like George P. Schultz did, which is to, make the rat lines run faster, make the gerbils go around the cage faster so that they can drive the engines of commerce faster. Everybody work faster, take shorter breaks, and stop thinking about anything but your job. Those are Synarchist ideas that tie us directly to two very important American figures, which was Felix Rohatin, I talked about yesterday or last time, and George P. Schultz, George P. Schultz was a Synarchist. There you go. Yeah, that looks like a picture from the American South in a way, doesn't it? Except for with different color faces. Yeah, everybody is a slave unless you have noble blood. That's just the way it is. Or if you're in the church, then you don't have to be a slave. So let's get that map back up, Andy, where I showed Vichy France again, because this is a situation in 1940. France, Paris falls, but the people that set up the Vichy government knew that Paris was going to fall. In fact, they had made a deal with Hitler already before the war, because the whole idea of Hitler was that Hitler was going to be the hitman for the Synarchy. Now, this is complicated, but these French Synarchists were basically working with the Cliveden set in London and trying to get Hitler to be invited, I guess, to take over Great Britain. They wanted to make a Synarchist empire consisting of France, Germany, and Great Britain. And the way they were going to do it was that France and Great Britain would join together with Hitler. Then Hitler would drive the tanks into Russia and they would take over Russia. Hitler would do the dirty work, get rid of all the Poles and Jews and East Europeans that are in the way. And then, when they were done with Hitler, the French and British and Dutch and Italian, wherever the Synarchists, the whole Synarchism is not allied to, it doesn't reserve itself into a state. It's a businessman's plot. They would then turn on Hitler and get rid of him, and then they would own not only Europe, but also all the way through European Russia. So we get an entirely different view of why World War II happened. World War II happened because the British wouldn't go along with the plot. World War II happened because, King Edward VIII, the fascist, the lover of all things Nazi, did not have a strong enough contingent in the British government to get Britain to go along with the Synarchist plot, which mainly would have been, putting a puppet like Henry VIII. I mean, Mr. Henry VIII, Edward was, yeah, I think it was Edward VIII. What was his name? The one that married Wallis Simpson, or somebody like that, just a figurehead, and then let the Synarchy run everything from behind the throne. That was the idea. Now, who stopped it? Who stopped that from happening? Well, according to the studies I've made basically through the LaRouche people, that it was Franklin Roosevelt that stopped it. And Franklin Roosevelt contacted Winston Churchill and said, "Hey, um, we can't let this happen. We're going to have to stop this." So what you have now is you have two groups of competing parts of the synarchy. You have your French, Vatican, Southern European based synarchy, which we've been talking about with the crazy flag with a double-headed axe on it. But then you also have the combination, yeah, there's a lot you can read about it. Amazing stuff there. There you can see the Shaven report referred to in Andy's post there. Vichy Sûreté chief believed that a Synarchist plot was responsible for the calamitous fall of France. Well, it did fall kind of calamitously and very suddenly. And although we can say, yeah, it was a lot of armor and they were brilliant to go right through the Ardennes, on the other hand, it did look awfully easy, at least getting to Paris, didn't it? So this idea that the Synarchists would take over the economy of Europe and Britain was the real pot boiling behind the scenes that FDR saw. And that would have been too big a power for us looking from the other side of the Atlantic to deal with. We did have, and we've had for a long time a special relationship of trade with Britain. And the idea of being isolated from Europe probably was motivating Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, when he said to Churchill, "We have to stop this." And so it was Churchill that made the break from the Cliveden set in Britain and said, "No, we're not gonna go along with this." Yeah, I know Churchill's not my favorite person either because he was a a friend of the elites. The city, he's basically think of the city of London. The banking system is who he really works for. And that really gets down to where we're at. Is it the British Rothschilds, the Roosevelts, the Rockefellers, and a very important French bank called Lazard, Lazard, were basically in conflict. The British running the Lazard French bank, and that basically is a Rothschild venture when you dig underneath of Lazard. That ties us directly to the American version of synarchy, which today has been best represented by Dick Cheney. So Dick Cheney was, or I guess it still is, the latest incarnation of people such as Felix Rohatin. Let's look at Felix Rohatin for a moment on his Wikipedia, Rohatyn, and we'll see that he is one of the original bankers with the Synarchy that came to the United States. Okay, uh, if you scroll down to his background, Andy, I want to just emphasize that he is from a Ukrainian background. Wait a minute, go back, go back, go back. Let's see. Yeah, go back one more. Oh, right in the middle. There, stop. The name Rohatin, and there's a place called Rohatin in Ukraine now, right now, today there is. So this is where his roots are. Rohatin was born in Vienna in 1928, a son of a Polish Jew and Edith Noel, a native of Austria, who divorced him. His great-grandfather, Feivel Rohatin, was chief rabbi of Zlotstov in Austrian Galicia, now in the Ukraine. His father managed breweries controlled by the family in Vienna, Romania, and Yugoslavia. The people that managed the breweries were the ones that were appointed that. That was the way that they made a lot of money, and it was an exclusive right that came from the royalty. Now, stop for a second and imagine that you're looking at the movie Casablanca, and you see Ilsa, and you see Humphrey Bogart, but the other leading man, the one that is so patriotic to France, right? And they all stand up and they sing La Marseillaise. And who is it that leads the song? It's Victor Laszlo, right? Victor Laszlo. Now, think of that image of Victor Laszlo getting on the plane. As I read to you, the family left Austria in 1935 for France. After the German invasion of France in 1940, they fled to Casablanca, Lisbon, and in 1941, Rio de Janeiro, before arriving in the United States in 1942. Casablanca was made in 1942. Luis Martins de Souza Dantas, the Brazilian ambassador to France, provided visas that enabled them to escape France and the Holocaust by sailing from Marseille to Casablanca. Okay, so now we know that Felix Rohatin comes from a Ukrainian or Galician Jewish background, that he flees to France, gets to Marseille, finds passage to Casablanca. Then he gets on the Lisbon plane, and he goes to Portugal, and then Portugal to Brazil, and then Brazil to New York. And now, instead of being just humble French Victor Laszlo, he now becomes one of the financial wizards of America, one of the most important men of the 20th century. Let's go back to his wiki for another look at Felix Rohatin, Andy. Want to read more about his career. Okay, now, after we know his background, Jewish financier, an American investment banker, he spent most of his career with Lazard, okay, where he brokered numerous large corporate mergers and acquisitions from the 1960s through the 1990s. In 1975, he played a central role in preventing the bankruptcy of New York City as chairman of the Municipal Assistance Corporation, the MAC. So here's the deal. You get a jurisdiction, let's just take the city of New York, you get it into debt. It's going to go bankrupt. The debts are two banks, right? So you have a political solution, which comes along in the form of a municipal corporation. Now, a corporation created by the state or the city. Most corporations are for private purposes, to run a business. But this corporation has been created by the state. So that makes it essentially a state-run operation. But it's placed into private hands. And whose hands is it in? It's in the hands of Felix Rohatin, the Synarchist, that wants to take all of the value away from small business, away from little people, away from your 401k, and put it into the big pile of money, that one that's going to solve everybody's problems. The Mac is going to solve everybody's problems. Well, this is a typical Synarchist scheme, because what ends up is the contractors make money, just like in war, the military complex, but now it's kind of, a fake way of rebuilding the city. We're going to have urban renewal. Um, now, oh, and then again, the Hurricane Sandy was he was a chairman of that. And he was ambassador to France and Monaco after the war. Now, career in finance. He joined the New York office of Lazard under Andre Meyer, and Andre Meyer deserves a lot of attention too. He's the main banker for the Synarchy. Andre Meyer, again Jewish, and ends up, I believe, in America. Anyway, uh-oh, it sounds like Coco's got a mission. Rohatton is the Lazard banker that was able to force through the IT&T Hartford Insurance merger. And that's what brings it directly into Macduff's life. And the reason that I was so excited when I first realized this about a week ago was that now I can see the motives behind things that have happened in my life. I can see that my father was being groomed to be one of the guys that would work with a Felix Rohatin and Lazard in order to drain American companies and put the money into the Synarchy. And this is what happens. It's just like Mitt Romney and what he does, but this was earlier. And the the amazing thing about the Hartford Insurance Company was that it was started way back in the 1840s as one of the oldest insurance companies in America and had apparently at that time quite a huge amount of cash. And that was the target of the merger that was run by Rohatyn. Now, my father was being groomed by people in the Hartford insurance hierarchy. That's why he ended up getting somehow put into Loomis School with elites. And that's why I think, he was selected to be the midshipman commander of his class at Columbia Midshipman School and when he joined the Navy. I think that's why he was given some preferences. But when it turned out that he would not support this synarchy, that's when things started to go bad for him. In my father's cousin William Cotter's life, he was the insurance commissioner of Connecticut. He would have been put in that place to facilitate this as well. But I wonder if my dad had been cooperative with them, that it might have been my dad that became the congressman from the first district of Hartford. And somehow they were able to get his cousin to do it. This is important to me, understanding family dynamics that have been a mystery to me my whole life. So now I see that the hidden hand behind the Hartford ITT merger is Felix Rohatin, and Felix Rohatin is a synarchist working for Lazard, and Lazard is one of the many Rothschild banks that is associated with the City of London. And it was World War II was a fight for control of the synarchy. The synarchy of the Pope, of Pacelli, of Pope Pius XII. Well, he chose to be with the Hitler side. And Allen Dulles and Sullivan and Cromwell and the Wall Street folks, they decided to be with the City of London side. And because the connections between Wall Street and the City of London were so tight, even back in 1940, it became FDR's policy to support the British. Not because we love Britain, but because of the banks. The Wall Street banks would have been the driving force that said to our American government, you got to go one more time. You got to get the boys into the uniforms. You got to put them over there in Europe and let them get slaughtered one more time. One more time, do it for the Gipper. Do it for do it for good old Notre Dame. But to go and take that war route was as much about protecting the Wall Street banks in 1940 as it is today in Ukraine, where we deal with the same issues because we have the same, fascist ideologies, whether it's racial hegemony or nobility or just plain old money that creates different classes of people. And synarchy has been with us for a long time, but it's hidden behind the scenes, and it makes it's if you look at those many memes that say, well, the left and the right are both part of the same bird, right? But now you know who's causing the wings to flap. It's the synarchy. It's the banks that be, the powers that be, always about protecting their wealth and always looking for new schemes to draw all the wealth out of the bottom and put it into their secret coffers where they can use it to finance more and more takeovers and wars by any means necessary. Because they have a fundamental belief, and I know that this was the fundamental belief of Pope Pius the Ninth, Pius the Tenth, Pius the 12th. I haven't studied the 11th enough to say, but probably that people are divided into different classes. Nobility is legitimate. Monarchy is legitimate. Empires are the best forms of government. That is the old European view of humanity that we say in our Declaration of Independence is bogus. It doesn't, it's wrong. And yet, you know, you're fighting against an empire that's existed for thousands of years. And they have, in their own minds, in their own hearts, in their own religious belief, the idea that constitutional republics are foolish, cannot work, and should be dismantled by any means necessary. And that's Dick Cheney's task. That's the task of Felix Rohatin, and that is the enemy, the unseen enemy, the third force, Synarchy. All right, tonight I'll see you at 8 p.m. and we will read some more from Rulers of Evil and see how all of this ties together over hundreds of years. Thanks for being with me. Good day now.